I saved 3 starving dogs from a blizzard, but their abusive owner tracked us down. Now, I'm ready to risk everything protecting my new family from the monster who hurt them. I remember that day like it was yesterday. A sound cut through the howling wind. Different, desperate. At first I dismissed it as another trick of the storm, but there it was again. A whimper, followed by a scratching at my door. I rose slowly, my joints protesting the movement, and approached the window. Through the frost-covered glass, I could make out 3 dark shapes huddled on my porch. My heart skipped a beat when I realized what I was seeing. A German shepherd, rail-thin and trembling, stood there with 2 tiny puppies pressed against her sides. The mother's eyes caught mine through the glass, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, a connection, a plea for help that bypassed all words. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. I'd chosen this life of solitude for a reason. The years of saving lives, of pulling people from burning buildings, of seeing both triumph and tragedy had left their marks. I'd retreated to this cabin to heal, to forget, to live in peace with my memories. But those eyes. Before I knew it, I was opening the door, fighting against the wind that threatened to tear it from my grasp. "Come on," I called out, my voice nearly lost in the storm. The mother dog looked at me warily, her body tense despite her obvious exhaustion. The puppies whimpered, pressing closer to her. "It's okay," I said softly, kneeling down despite my creaking knees. "You're safe here." Something in my voice must have convinced her, because she took a tentative step forward, then another. The puppies followed, their tiny legs trembling with cold and fear. As soon as they crossed the threshold, I closed the door, shutting out the howling storm. The scent of wet fur filled my small cabin, mixing with the lingering aroma of coffee and wood smoke. In the warm light, I could see just how desperate their condition was. The mother's fur was matted and dirty, her ribs clearly visible through her coat. The puppies weren't much better, though they had the resilience of youth on their side. I moved slowly to the kitchen, aware of the mother's eyes following my every movement. From the cupboard, I retrieved some leftover chicken from my dinner. As I placed it in a bowl, I could hear the mother's quiet whine, a sound of both hunger and uncertainty. "Here you go," I said, placing the bowl on the floor and stepping back. She approached cautiously, her body low to the ground, always keeping herself between me and her pups. Only when she was sure I wouldn't move did she begin to eat, allowing her puppies to join her. As I watched them eat, I felt something shift inside me. The walls I'd built around my heart over the years began to crack. These 3 lost souls had found their way to my door on this stormy night, and somehow I knew my life would never be the same. I made up a bed for them near the fireplace using old blankets, keeping my movements slow and predictable. The mother watched me with those intense eyes, but there was less fear now, perhaps even a glimmer of trust. The puppies, their bellies full, were already falling asleep, tiny bodies curled against each other. That night, as the storm raged outside, I lay in my bed listening to the soft breathing of my unexpected guests. For the first time in years, my cabin didn't feel empty. It felt like something was beginning, something both terrifying and wonderful. I closed my eyes, knowing sleep would be elusive. My mind was already racing with plans for tomorrow. They would need proper food, veterinary care, and most importantly, they would need time to heal and learn to trust. It wouldn't be easy, but then again, nothing worthwhile ever was. Days melted into a routine of caring for Grace and her puppies. each moment bringing new challenges and small victories. The once frightened mother dog began showing subtle signs of trust, a slightly relaxed posture when I entered the room, the occasional wag of her tail during feeding time. Her pups, Snow and Ash, grew stronger daily, their tiny bodies filling out as proper nutrition worked its magic. Every morning, I'd wake to find Grace stationed by the door, her maternal instincts never wavering. She'd watch me prepare their meals with keen attention, those intelligent eyes following my every move. The transformation in her physical condition was remarkable. Her coat began to shine, and the prominent ribs that had initially horrified me started to disappear beneath a healthy layer of muscle. The trip to the veterinarian was an ordeal I'll never forget. Loading 3 nervous dogs into my truck tested both my patience and Grace's trust. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a compassionate woman with gentle hands, confirmed what I'd suspected. Grace had endured severe neglect. X-rays revealed old fractures that had healed poorly, telling a story of abuse that made my stomach turn. "She's lucky you found her," Dr. Martinez said, running her hand along Grace's back. "These injuries? Someone was cruel to her, John. Very cruel." While discussing Grace's history with the local animal shelter, I learned more about the dark side of dog breeding. The shelter worker, a middle-aged woman named Helen, explained how some breeders dispose of dogs they consider spent mothers who can no longer produce puppies profitably. The thought of Grace being discarded like garbage made my hands shake with rage. Back at the cabin, I established a routine that seemed to help Grace feel secure. Regular meals, gentle grooming sessions, and quiet evenings by the fire became our norm. Snow and Ash grew more playful, their personalities emerging day by day. Snow was the adventurous one, always first to investigate new things, while Ash preferred to observe carefully before joining in. Grace's maternal devotion never ceased to amaze me. She'd clean her pups meticulously, teach them basic dog behaviors, and correct them with gentle nips when they got too rowdy. Watching her, I couldn't fathom how anyone could mistreat such a dedicated mother. As weeks passed, Grace began to show more of her true personality. She was intelligent, quick to learn commands, and possessed an almost uncanny ability to sense my moods. On days when memories of old fire calls haunted me, she'd press against my leg, offering silent comfort. The pups, too, seemed to know when I needed their special brand of chaos to pull me out of dark thoughts. During our daily walks around the property, Grace proved to be an excellent guardian. She'd position herself between the pups and any potential threat, whether real or imagined. Her protective instincts extended to me as well, though in a different way. She'd often pause during our walks to check on me, as if making sure I was still there, still part of their pack. The vet visits became easier as Grace learned to trust the process. Dr. Martinez praised her recovery, noting how well she was adapting to her new life. The pups received their vaccinations, and blood tests confirmed they were healthy despite their rough start in life. Sometimes, late at night, I'd find Grace sitting by the window, staring into the darkness. I wondered what memories played through her mind, what shadows from her past still haunted her. But then she'd turn to look at me, and I'd see something new in those eyes. Not just trust, but a growing confidence, a sense of security. Training sessions became a daily ritual. Grace proved to be highly intelligent, quickly mastering basic commands and even some advanced ones. The pups watched and learned from their mother, their own training progressing naturally through imitation. It was during these sessions that I truly saw Grace's personality bloom. She was eager to please, quick to learn, and showed an enthusiasm that belied her traumatic past. As their health improved, so did their playfulness. The living room became an impromptu playground, with Snow and Ash tumbling over each other, while Grace watched with what I swore was an indulgent smile. The sound of paws on hardwood and happy puppy yips filled my once silent cabin with life and joy. Yet despite these positive changes, Grace maintained a vigilant nature. Any unusual sound would bring her to alert, ears forward, body tense. These moments reminded me that healing takes time, that trust, once broken, requires patience and consistency to rebuild. But with each passing day, as we formed our unlikely family, I saw hope growing stronger in those expressive eyes that had first captured my heart on that stormy night. The shadows grew longer, and an unsettling quiet descended upon the woods surrounding my cabin. Something had changed in the air, a shift so subtle that most would miss it. But my years as a firefighter had taught me to trust my instincts. They were rarely wrong. I first noticed the oddities during my morning walks with Grace and the pups. Snow and Ash would bound ahead, their playful energy infectious, while Grace stayed close to my side. But occasionally she would freeze, her ears pricked forward, muscles tense. Her behavior reminded me of my old search and rescue days, the way our dogs would alert to hidden dangers. The signs were small at first, broken twigs that shouldn't have been broken, footprints that disappeared into the undergrowth. The eerie sensation of being watched prickled at the back of my neck, making my skin crawl. Grace's protective instincts kicked into overdrive. She began patrolling the perimeter of the cabin at night, her low growls breaking the silence. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, studying our routines, learning our patterns. The thought of someone watching us, possibly the same person who had treated Grace so cruelly, made my stomach churn. The peaceful sanctuary I'd built was being invaded, and I wouldn't stand for it. Deputy Miller arrived within an hour of my call. Young and eager, but with sharp eyes that missed little, she listened intently as I explained my concerns. "Better safe than sorry," she said, strapping on her utility belt. "Let's take a look around." We found the campsite 300 yards into the dense woods, hidden beneath a natural overhang. It was clear someone had been living there for days, perhaps weeks. Empty food cans, a worn sleeping bag, and most disturbing of all, several lengths of rope tied to nearby trees. My mind conjured images of Grace tied up, struggling against those same ropes, and my hands clenched into fists. "This is definitely concerning," Deputy Miller said, photographing the scene. "These ropes, they're positioned to create some kind of containment area. Whoever set this up knows what they're doing." Back at the cabin, I reinforced the locks on all the doors and windows. I installed motion sensor lights and a security camera system, perhaps excessive for a cabin in the woods, but I wouldn't take chances with Grace and the pups' safety. Each night, I made sure they slept in my bedroom, the door firmly locked. Grace seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. She became more vigilant, more protective of her pups. Snow and Ash, still too young to comprehend the danger, continued their playful antics, but Grace watched them like a hawk, never letting them stray too far. The waiting was the hardest part, knowing someone was out there, watching, planning. I found myself jumping at every snapped twig, every rustle in the bushes. My peaceful retirement had transformed into a tense vigil, but I wouldn't have it any other way. These dogs had become my family, and I would protect them with everything I had. Deputy Miller increased her patrols in the area, But our mysterious watcher remained elusive. The campsite had been abandoned shortly after we discovered it, but fresh signs would appear every few days. New footprints, displaced branches, the occasional glimpse of a shadow moving through the trees. I began carrying my old service revolver during our walks, the weight of it both comforting and disturbing. I'd left violence behind when I retired from firefighting, or so I'd thought. But sometimes protecting what you love means being ready for anything. One particularly tense evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Grace's bark shattered the silence. It wasn't her usual alert bark. This was different, filled with fear and rage. Snow and ash huddled behind my legs as I peered into the gathering darkness. There, just at the edge of the trees, I caught a glimpse of a face, pale and cruel, in the fading light. It disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, but the message was clear. They were getting bolder. That night, I sat in my rocking chair, Grace at my feet, her head resting on my knee. The pups were asleep in their bed nearby, little chests rising and falling peacefully. I stroked Grace's head, feeling the trust she'd placed in me. "I won't let anyone hurt you again," I whispered. "I promise." The darkness outside pressed against the windows, full of unknown threats, but inside our cabin, we remained vigilant, united, ready to face whatever came our way. The peaceful retirement I'd planned had become something else entirely, a mission, a purpose, a stand against cruelty. And despite the fear and uncertainty, I wouldn't have it any other way. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across my yard when I heard the distinctive rumble of an engine breaking the peaceful silence. A beat-up pickup truck, its blue paint peeling and rust eating at the edges, came barreling up my driveway, kicking up gravel in its wake. My stomach twisted as I watched a burly man leap out, his movements aggressive and purposeful. His face was a roadmap of hard living, deep creases around cold eyes, a jagged scar running along his jaw. The moment I saw him, I knew this was the monster who had hurt Grace, who had treated her like disposable property rather than a living, feeling creature. "That's my dog," he snarled, jabbing a dirty finger toward my cabin. "I've been looking for her, and I'm taking her back." Inside, I could hear Grace's low growl, protective and fearful. The pups whimpered, sensing the tension. My hands began to shake, not from fear, but from a rage I hadn't felt in years. During my firefighting days, I'd seen plenty of human cruelty, but this was personal. "She's not going anywhere with you," I said, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through my veins. "Those days are over?" He took a menacing step forward, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Listen, old man, that's my breeding dog, and those pups are worth good money. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I didn't hesitate. I reached inside my cabin door and grabbed my rifle, the wooden stock smooth and familiar in my hands. It wasn't loaded, didn't need to be. Sometimes the suggestion of force is more powerful than force itself. I'd learned that lesson well over the years. I said no. I chambered around, the sound echoing across the yard. Grace isn't property. She's a living being who deserves better than what you gave her. His face twisted into something ugly, a mask of rage and frustration. "You threatening me, old-timer? Over some worthless mutt?" "I'm not threatening you," I replied, my voice ice-cold. "I'm making you a promise. You take one more step toward this cabin, and you'll regret it." The standoff stretched, seconds feeling like hours. I could hear my own heartbeat, steady and strong. Behind me, Grace had emerged onto the porch, her presence both defensive and defiant. She wasn't cowering anymore. She was standing her ground, just like I was. The man's eyes darted between Grace, the rifle, and me. I could see the calculations running behind those cold eyes, weighing the risk against the reward. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "You don't know what you're getting into," he spat. "That dog's mine by law. I've got papers." "Papers don't mean anything when they're bought with cruelty," I cut him off. "I've got witnesses who've seen what you did to her. I've got vet records showing the state you left her in. You want to take this to the authorities? Be my guest." Something in my tone must have reached him, because I saw the first flicker of uncertainty cross his face. Good. He needed to understand that this wasn't just about a dog and her pups. This was about right and wrong, about standing up against cruelty. "This isn't over," he growled, backing toward his truck. "I'll be back, and next time will be the same as this time," I said firmly. "Except next time, I'll have the sheriff waiting. Your choice." He slammed the truck door so hard the whole vehicle shook, engine roaring to life. As he reversed down my driveway, spewing gravel and curses, I kept the rifle trained on him until he disappeared around the bend. Only then did I lower the weapon, my hands shaking with the aftermath of adrenaline. Grace pressed against my leg, her warm presence grounding me. I reached down to scratch behind her ears, feeling the trust she'd placed in me, the bond we'd formed. "It's okay, girl," I murmured. "He's gone. You're safe now." Looking into her eyes, I saw not just gratitude, but strength. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a survivor. And I would make damn sure she stayed that way, no matter what it took. The confrontation with the stranger left me shaken, but more determined than ever to protect my newfound family. Grace's reaction to him had confirmed my worst fears. This was the man who had treated her so cruelly. As I watched him drive away, kicking up gravel and dust, I kept my rifle trained on his truck until it disappeared around the bend. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the cabin, every whisper of wind had me reaching for my weapon. Grace seemed equally unsettled, pacing between the pups and the door, her ears constantly alert. Snow and ash, blissfully unaware of the danger, slept peacefully in their bed by the fireplace. I spent the next few days fortifying the cabin. New locks on the doors, motion sensors in the yard, and plenty of ammunition for my rifle. Deputy Miller increased his patrols in the area, but we both knew the property was too isolated for quick response if trouble came. A week passed with no sign of the stranger, but his threat lingered like smoke after a fire. Then, on a crisp morning, my phone rang. It was Deputy Miller, his voice charged with excitement. "John, you're not going to believe this. That guy who showed up at your place? He's been arrested in Nevada, multiple counts of animal abuse, running an illegal breeding operation. They found dozens of dogs in horrible conditions." The relief that flooded through me was almost physical. I looked over at Grace, who was teaching her pups to play tug-of-war with an old rope. She caught my eye and wagged her tail, something she'd only recently started doing. The transformation in her since that stormy night was remarkable. "They're asking for documentation of his activities here," Miller continued. "Would you be willing to make a statement about what happened?" "Absolutely," I replied, without hesitation. "Whatever it takes to keep him away from these dogs." Over the next few weeks, I worked with local authorities to document Grace's condition when she arrived, her slow recovery, and the confrontation with her abuser. The evidence would help ensure he faced consequences for his actions here too. As spring arrived, bringing new life to the forest around us, I watched Grace and her pups flourishing. Snow had grown into a magnificent white shepherd, gentle but protective, while Ash had developed a mischievous streak that kept us all on our toes. Grace had filled out beautifully, her coat now glossy and thick, her eyes bright with intelligence and trust. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Grace rested her head on my knee, something she'd never done before. I scratched behind her ears, remembering the frightened, desperate mother who had appeared during that blizzard. "You're safe now, girl," I whispered. "You're home." The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd come to this cabin seeking solitude, thinking isolation was what I needed after retiring from the fire service. The memories of those I couldn't save, the weight of responsibility, the constant adrenaline I thought distance from everything would help me find peace. Instead, it took 3 abandoned dogs to show me what I really needed: purpose, connection, love. Grace had taught me about resilience, about how trust can be rebuilt even after the deepest betrayal. Snow and Ash showed me the pure joy of play and discovery, reminding me how to live in the moment. My cabin was no longer just a retreat from the world. It had become a sanctuary, a place of healing for all of us. The silence that once filled these rooms had been replaced by the click of paw steps on wooden floors, the jingle of collar tags, and the occasional happy bark. As summer approached, I started taking them on longer walks through the woods. Grace, once so fearful of leaving the cabin's safety, now led our little pack with confidence. She seemed to understand that the threat was gone, that her past couldn't hurt her anymore. The local animal shelter asked if I would consider fostering other rescued dogs, given how well Grace and her pups had recovered under my care. At first, I hesitated. Our family felt complete. But then I remembered that stormy night, how close I'd come to turning them away, and how much richer my life had become because I'd opened my door. "Yes," I told them, "we have room for more." Looking at Grace, contentedly watching her pups play in the yard, I realized that sometimes the best way to heal ourselves is to help heal others. My life of solitude had ended the moment I let these dogs into my home, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Sometimes the greatest acts of rescue work both ways. In saving them, I had saved myself. Now when I look into Grace's eyes, I no longer see desperation and fear. I see strength, trust, and love. We had both faced our demons and emerged stronger. In this quiet corner of the world, we had found not just shelter, but family. And that, I realized, was worth fighting for. Thank you for watching. If you like the story, feel free to comment, like, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.